Morning, everyone, and welcome to Knowledge is Power. This is our first episode to open the year 2021. So, Happy New Year, everyone. And I'm excited today to introduce our first speaker for the year, Robin Clare. And so, Robin worked for 25 years in corporate America and in nonprofit administration. Even then, she had a deep passion for spirituality and wellness. In Robin's corporate life, she yearned to live a life where she could be her true, authentic self. This commitment to her spiritual journey had led her to understand her soul mission. Robin has traveled across the globe to study with spiritual masters and grow her divine gifts. Robin was named Best 10 Life Business Coach and Best 10 Energy Healer in the Natural Nutmeg in 2017, 2018, and 2019 Readers Poll.
And 2020.
Oh, update. Thank you. Okay, and Robin has documented her extraordinary spiritual journey in her highly acclaimed books, Messiah Within, and the Amazon best-selling spiritual book, The Divine Keys. And today she continues to share her journey, and she'll share with us her most recent book, Feast and Famine. And having said all that, Robin, welcome.
Thank you, Adrienne. It's a pleasure to be here, especially as your first guest of the year. So I'm excited for that.
Well, I felt you would be the most appropriate first guest. I know a lot of people at this time of year are working on their goals, they're working on resolutions, their life plan, and trying to get a better understanding. And we all know 2020 was quite a challenge spiritually, professionally, and personally for many of us, right?
Yeah.
So, having also come from the corporate world, tell us how you got from the corporate world into the spiritual world.
Yes. So it was an interesting journey. I was in corporate, and every weekend I would become like a spiritual warrior. I would go do different events, and then during the week I was the typical corporate warrior, looking to see how far I could go in my career and, what could I accomplish, all while being a working mom, which is, as many of your listeners know, is always quite the challenge. And about 22 years into this, the corporate mom rat race, I started really feeling that I wanted to become my authentic self because I was one person during the week and another person on the weekends studying spirituality. And I knew I couldn't bring spirituality into the workplace at that time. It just was, talking about spirituality was like talking about sex. You just couldn't do both. You couldn't do that at work. So I stood on my deck for almost a year asking, how can I be of greater service to mankind? I stood there, whatever the weather was. And what I didn't know that I was doing at the time was actually committing to a life of what I call divine service, that I was that level of dedication to standing out there, asking the question, waiting for the answer, sort of locked me into this life of a good lock-in to this life of being of divine service. And so I came out of corporate first as a spiritual business promoter because I didn't really know how to make the transition. I was trying to be that bridge between spirituality and everyday life. And so I thought, well, if I can promote others, that would be a great way to do that. And then along the line, I began to hear messages from in my own meditations, but from all my spiritual friends, what about you, Robin? And I'm like, what about me? I'm having a great time. I had 3 spiritual centers, and I just loved watching light bulbs go off for people as they were learning. And then I began to hear, you're the teacher. You're the teacher too. And so I was then guided to write my first book, Messiah Within, a guide to knowing your inner divinity. Like, what does it mean to go inside? And then I wasn't living those teachings, so I was guided to write the Divine Keys, 18 Keys to a Divinely Guided Life. which then brought me to my third book. Now, I am a spiritual channel, meaning that I am able to access the non-physical realm. And so these books come at the request of ascended beings who want information to be received by humanity. And so the third book came as a request from Sophia, who refers to herself as the giver of grace on this planet. And she's also known in Judaism as the Shekhinah and in Christianity as the Holy Spirit. And she came and asked me to write a book called Feast and Famine, Healing Addiction with Grace. The good thing is that they give me the titles, which makes my life a little easier, because doing this work isn't always easy, but it's extraordinarily interesting. And she said to me, I want you to write a book to help humanity with their struggle with addiction. And I said, okay. And then she said, and I want you to tell your story of recovery too. But the problem, Adrienne, is that I was still in addiction. So I thought I would fake it till I make it. And then at the end of the book, I was still in addiction. So at the end of the book, I wrote, I hope these teachings from Sophia work for you. They didn't work for me, so have a nice life. And so I just put the book down and I figured I have to get into into recovery. So what am I in recovery from?
That's what I was going to ask. Yes.
I struggled for 40 years with obsessive compulsive food disorder and bulimia. And so I couldn't get into recovery until I hit rock bottom. And for me, the rock bottom was my last bulimic episode was very destructive to my body. I finally could feel everything that I was doing to my body. It was like spirit turned on my body turned on, like, let's look at this bulimic episode from the inside out, Robin. And I actually wound up on the floor because I had pain in my back, in my neck, in my head, in my internal organs, and I was bleeding from my nose. So it was like, let's really look at the impact of this action of bulimia, what it does to the body, because it's so violent to the body.
And I'm also a conventionally trained registered nurse from a long time ago. I never thought of bulimia as an addiction. So that, and I don't know, that's so interesting to me.
I don't think anybody does. And yet there are 30 million people in this country that suffer from food disorders, but they call it a disorder. And I chose to call it an addiction, because here's why. Thank you for asking me that, because here's why it is. Because Sophia said that there is only one addiction on the planet, one true addiction, and that's the suffering. And so if you're suffering over anything in your life, your past, your present, your fear of the future, then you are in addiction. And then most likely you are choosing a secondary source to be addicted to as well, to maintain your wallowing in your pain of your suffering. And so that can be what we consider standard addictive sources: alcohol, cigarettes, gambling. It could be porn. It could be, but we're now seeing that people are actually addicted to sugar, and that people are addicted to Netflix. People are addicted to Facebook, right? Like, people are addicted to things, looking at their phone. Like, I have this thing where I try not to bring my phone into the bathroom. I'm like, I think I can live without my phone, not in the bathroom. But I think people are really, that need to be in that level of connection says that you're suffering from something. Maybe you're lonely, maybe something is going on. And so what we talk about in Feast and Famine, Healing Addiction with Grace, is to be able to look at, what are you suffering about? what is it that you really need? And that was helpful to me as I was coming into recovery. When I would start thinking about obsessively eating, the question I had to ask myself is, what are you really hungry for, Robin? I'm sure it's not a third or a fourth cookie, right? Right? I don't think so. I mean, who's hungry for cookies? We're not really hungry for cookies. We're hungry for a sandwich or, something, a piece of some breakfast. But the other things like sweet, we're not hungry for them. We desire them. And so I had to say, what is it that I'm hungry for? What am I missing? And that was very helpful for me in maintaining my recovery. And then also now dropping all the weight that I had gained over the course of 40 years. And
the answer to what are you hungry for come quickly?
Yeah, because I would sit down quietly and stop the obsessive need to go to the closet, right, or the pantry and say, what are you hungry for? Sometimes it was just maybe a hug, right? Or it was, I'm hungry for being outside. Like I need to breathe outside. I'm working all day. I'm writing, I'm teaching, so what do I need? I need Mother Earth, right? I need to be outside and I need to breathe. I may need to call my mother or a friend, right? Or my kids, right? Like maybe I just need a sense of connection.
Connection, I think, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not always, we look for that. And then also when I get to a place of, if I do get to a place of obsessive eating, I start to take a look at, what is going on about that. Why am I getting back into that habit? One of the good things that happened to me this year is that I recognize that I'm actually allergic to chocolate. And chocolate was my number one obsessive eating thing. But I every year, 2 or 3 times a year, I would get this chronic cough. And I tried everything to figure out, why am I coughing? Why am I coughing? Why am I coughing? And I realized that I was allergic to chocolate. So that has helped me a lot, to be able to not have my source, because I would eat like an entire candy bar, a big one, even in recovery, right, throughout the course of the day. In bulimia, when I was active in that, I would eat, God, I can't even tell you how much chocolate, because I knew that I had an out, which was an unhealthy out, but I had an out. And so this is what we came to talk about, really, was this idea of resolutions and why I think they're not sustainable in the long run is because people have to look at, what are they suffering about, right? Not just stopping
Before
the
we go
habit.
there, I
Yeah,
interrupted you and I apologize. You said when you went into recovery, you
yeah.
lost a lot of weight. First of all, I can't even imagine you heavy. You look like the picture of health right now.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel good. Thank you.
So, how much weight, and did you have a strategy or did it just come off?
Yeah, and I was fortunate. My husband did it with me, which is very helpful. Um, and what we did is we used an app called MyFitnessPal, and we started tracking our calories during the day. And now people are like, I don't want to track my calories, but it's always been calories in, calories out. I mean, no matter what plan you're on, um, if you're eating too many calories, you're not going to lose the weight that you want to lose. And so I was tracking the amount of calories I was eating, but also what type of calories. So I was tracking the amount of carbs, fats, and proteins. And so trying to maintain a lower carb load, because I know the way my blood sugar works, I don't really digest carbs well. And Neither does my husband. And so that was helpful. So then we could start thinking about what are we eating for dinner? So instead of having a potato with dinner, maybe we'll have 2 vegetables with our protein and having carbs earlier in the day. Like, so today I had wonderful oatmeal in the Instapot. I don't know if you have an Instapot, but I love it.
Intimidates me, but I know.
Oh God, it's the best thing ever. My son actually at dinner yesterday said, "Ma, do you think like on," because I made a boxed rice in the Instapot. He goes, "Do you think they're going to add Instapot instructions to all of these backs of boxes?" And I'm like, I don't know. It
Clever
depends how,
marketing idea.
right? So I did that. I tracked my calories and what I was eating in my Fitness Pal. I also took all my supplements and vitamins. I try to exercise every day, whether and it's nothing dramatic. It's going for a walk or yoga, and drinking my water.
So hard to do for
It is
everyone.
hard to do, but really it takes all of that to to lose the weight.
I totally
To,
agree.
to
How
take it
long
to
did it
take it
take you to
It
lose
took,
it?
well, we started at the beginning of COVID because we had 1 month of obsessive eating in COVID. And then Ori and I looked at each other and we're like, this isn't going to work. We're going to they're going to have to roll us out of here at the end of COVID-19. I mean, I saw, you've probably seen those memes on social media where people are, and I'm like, no, no, no. I go, why don't we do the opposite? Why don't we take off the weight? So I took off 25 pounds and Ori took off 50. And, it's funny looking at him now. He looks like he looked when we first met. And immediately I get nervous. I'm like, oh, something wrong with him. And then I'm like, no, 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 we did this on purpose.
Yeah, he's healthy.
He's healthy now, right? But your immediate reaction is, oh, look at how much weight he lost, and but it's a healthy weight. And we really didn't starve ourselves. We ate what's recommended, like 1,200 calories a day, which you can eat a lot of food with that, a lot of healthy food.
You can. And then if you felt temptation to go stray off the path, what were your strategies?
Well, you can stray off the path with my Fitness Pal because it's a matter of tracking how many calories you're eating. So if you want, see, when I was in obsessive eating something like oatmeal for breakfast would trigger me that, uh-oh, I was already bad. Now I don't know why I looked at oatmeal as bad, but it just was heavier in my stomach, and then it would start me on the whole obsessive, okay, well, what can I eat now? I've already been bad. So I had to actually learn that some healthy foods, even though they look like a carb, um, are not necessarily bad for you.
Right. There are good
And so
carbs and bad carbs, right?
I had to
Processed
really,
food.
mhm. I had to really train my mind to welcome in those foods, and then to stay within the calories. And if I wanted, I don't know, a couple of mini biscottis, then I had to account for that, because we can't, we can't always just be on a diet, right?
We know what
It's
the
it's
first 3 letters of the word diet spell, right?
Yes, yes. So we have to find a way to track, you know, consciously track. So I haven't been consciously tracking for the holiday season, but I know that I haven't put any weight on. I've just sort of been eating like a normal person would eat.
This is
And
typically a tough time for many people to stay
yeah,
on track.
yes. And I think watching your carb load is important. I don't even really know how keto works. I'm not a fan of keto or Whole 30. I'm not saying I'm not a fan of them. I'm just saying I think it is, as you get older, more difficult to burn carbs. And so if you track those, I think, and, get to a reasonable percentage of what you're eating all day, I think the weight will come off, and you can have a sandwich for lunch, right?
You're
And
a
your
good example of this. I mean, you really
yeah.
are I sincerely mean it. You're the picture of
And
health.
I am for sure tracking the grams of sugar that I'm eating every day. Two reasons. One, I don't think we need it, processed sugar. And two, I watch it too for my recovery. Since sugar addiction was the main source of my obsessive eating, I want to make sure that I'm being very careful about the grams of sugar that I'm eating, and trying to get them more from blueberries or apples, applesauce. I happen to like all healthy foods, so that's
That's
helpful.
helpful, right?
Yeah. I mean, it takes time to make a salad if you want a salad, right?
It does. And planning, right?
And planning.
Planning.
Right, right. Having enough food in the house, and um yeah. And we have been very COVID conservative. So we haven't done takeout or gone out to eat since it started. Um And that has helped too, because, that's the other thing they always say, don't go out to eat. You don't know what you're eating. You don't know how many calories. Well, I know exactly what we're eating every
Yes.
meal. And I'm not recommending that. I'm not suggesting that people do that. I'm suggesting they be careful, obviously, with COVID. But that choice we made, I think, has been very helpful. And it lines up with all good weight loss strategies about eating at home.
So then we go back to, and we will get to resolutions, but we go back
Mhm.
to, you wrote this book
I
one
did.
time,
First
and
time, yeah.
now that we've established what is an addiction, what happened?
So I wrote it the first time. I told you what I wrote at the end, and I'm like, okay, I can't publish this book. I can't publish it until I have an ending that's helpful. And so then I struggled for a while, more, maybe 6 months, 8 months more, with uh, trying to trying to stop being trying to stop being bulimic, trying to find what was the source of my suffering. Like, I started doing the teachings so that I could write the ending. Right?
That's
And
novel. Okay.
yeah. So I discovered that what I was suffering was from a fear of humiliation and a fear of persecution. And I discovered that this went back to past lives, when I was a spiritual teacher before. And it went back to, throughout my life, I did this sheet and looked at all the times that I've been humiliated. And the first time I was humiliated started with when the first time my mom put me on a diet, which was when I was 7 years old,
Oh my.
and put me on a diet at summer camp. And I was watching everybody eat desserts, and I could only have Jello. And every day I would run out of the dining room like crying, and because it was so humiliating. And so that set up this relationship between food and humiliation in general. And then I went back and I tracked my life, and there were like 20 times that I was humiliated in public. So I began to understand, as a person on the spiritual path who knows that trauma patterns happen, and trauma patterns are here for us to clear them from our karma. And so I started looking deeply into this trauma pattern of humiliation and persecution. And so a couple of things I realized. One, bulimia is a form of self-persecution. And so what I realized, and this was so profound for me, that every time I would have a bulimic episode, I would look in the mirror and I would roll my eyes at myself. And not be happy with myself. And this went on for 40 years. But then somewhere in my healing, looking at my life, working with a professional therapist to heal my trauma patterns, what I finally realized is that if I humiliated myself through bulimia, then no one could humiliate me other than myself. So if I got to myself first, a preemptive strike, right, then I wouldn't have to worry about anybody else doing it. Now that doesn't really make any sense, in a healthy, yeah, in a healthy world, but that's what my psyche was doing, right? So then how did I get beyond not feeling humiliated and persecution? Because I would have never had this conversation with anyone. People, when my book came out, people were like, what? Robin Clare? Are you kidding me? Like, I'm just like a normal person, but I'm also gifted in spirituality. And what I came to understand is that no one can humiliate me or persecute me unless I give them the title of judge. And that was so important to me, like to really understand. Now, everyone can give me their opinion. I can be on these podcasts and people could be like, I had one guy actually ask me if I was crazy.
On podcasts?
Yeah, if people think I'm crazy. And I said, well, actually, I don't really care what they think. Like, they can tell me but because I care what they think, but I don't take it personally anymore. I used to take everything personally, everything. Anybody said anything to me, I like absorbed it like a sponge. Like, oh my God, what if they don't like me? Oh my goodness, like, what about this? What about that? And then that would just feed my need to overeat. And then, of course, I would then continue the oppression of myself through the bulimia. And so these are things that I learned by reading my own book and listening to the teachings of Sophia. And then once I surrendered my suffering to up above, the grace just flowed in for how to heal my suffering and how to heal my life. And then ultimately the grace of how to become healthy. Because I always thought I was healthy. But I never really was. Like I was still taking my supplements and I was still drinking my water, and I'd have moments of weight loss, but I never have had moments of health and wellness. Like where I feel together, where I feel like my vibration is really strong.
And surrender.
Yeah, surrender. So that's
a tough one. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about surrender. So Sophia says that in the book that surrender is required. And when I wrote that chapter, so after I came into recovery, I rewrote the book, obviously. I looked at it from a place of recovery, but when I got to the chapter on surrender is required, I was guided to keep the beginning of the chapter as it was when I wrote surrender is required in addiction, and then add another in the same chapter, surrender is required as a person in recovery. And what a difference, because surrender in addiction is whiny and angry, right? Surrender in a person who is truly vested in recovery is grounded and really like coming from your most passionate, powerful internal space. Like, I am done with this. Not, I wish this would go away. Why does this happen to me? Like that's surrender in addiction. Like that's like the whiny, angry, why, if my mother had never done this or this person had never done that, I wouldn't have dealt with this. No looking back, no regret of the past, no fear of the future. It's this present moment energy where you are standing in your life and you are like, I am done. And we've all had those. It doesn't have to be from an addictive source. It could be about a job, a relationship, right? A way that you manage your children. I mean, it could be anything, right? And at that moment, here's what happens. When you are truly in surrender, two things happen. One, you begin to almost immediately understand what the problem was to begin with. I call those like shower moments, when you're working on a problem from work and you go in the shower and you're so relaxed washing your hair. And then all of a sudden the answer is there, right? Because you've surrendered the problem, at least for the time you're taking the shower, right? And then you get it's like, oh, yes, that's the answer, right? And that answer is grace, right? That answer comes so grace arrives. As soon as you're really in surrender, grace arrives, but grace must be accepted, allowed. That's the word that Sophia used. Grace must be allowed. So what does that mean? Because that was interesting language. Sometimes we are caught up in the roles that we play. I guess I'm the loser in my family, so I better hold on to that role, right? Someone might think, or, who am I I don't think I could do that without a drink. Like, I don't think I have the strength to do that. So we have these roles that we play, and that's why grace must be allowed, because when you're really in surrender, you have the grace that comes that must be allowed is the grace of healing. So how are you going to heal? What are you going to do? How are you going to get help? I do believe that if you do not look at your trauma patterns, you don't have to do past life if you think that's a little far-fetched, but at least do the ones from this lifetime, right? From your childhood, your teen years, your adult years, you'll see a pattern. And the pattern, people always ask me, how do you see the pattern? You know how I saw the pattern? So interesting. Like you could be washing dishes or something, right? And then this childhood memory comes up that's so random. You say, oh, that's random. Why am I thinking about the time that my father washed his car and someone put their muddy little handprints on the clean car and he lined up all the cousins, everybody lined up. And then when he got to me, my little hands fit the pattern. And he's like, you're the one that did this and you're the one that's going to be punished. And I'm like, I didn't do it. And my mom said, I screamed, I didn't do it. This was like early afternoon until I finally fell asleep after dinner. Like I screamed, I didn't do it because I didn't do it. I swear to this day, I didn't do it. Like I always go in and say, did you do it? And you just were mad you couldn't play with the other kids. No, I didn't do it. And so that again was one of those humiliating moments in public, the public being my family, right? Where I was accused of a crime that I didn't commit.
Does that go back to past lives?
Past lives, yeah, off with her head, right?
Yes.
Right? So those are the moments when you have those random memories come up. Please know this, they're coming up for healing, that they need to be healed. They're part of your trauma pattern. And so that's how I came up with my list of 21 times that I was humiliated, because I started looking at those memories that come up really random. Like you're like, oh yeah, that sucked. Oh yeah, that was awful, right? Random. Why am I thinking of this? I'm watching a movie and all of a sudden I'm thinking about in 5th grade where I kicked a home run and I was coming around third base and I was wearing a kilt that day at school. and my kilt fell off in front of my classmates. And so it was so humiliating because they were all laughing at me. And so for years, I had this idea in my psyche that if I kick a home run, people will laugh at me and I'll be humiliated. So there are these things that go on in our childhood, our teenage year, our adult, that at the time we have no idea the impact that they're going to have on our life, our 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 life of suffering, until we know what they are, and then we can heal them. We can talk to that part of ourselves through therapy, through however you choose to do it. I really highly recommend you go to a professional person, and talk to that part of yourself and say, listen, I'm a grown up now. I'm much healthier. I can manage this. You don't need to protect me anymore, because our inner child is here to protect us. The one that's holding on to all of those memories is protecting us from more bad things happening. And if we can
Perfect
talk,
segue, though. Inner child work. And I know
yeah,
for you that took you abroad.
it did. It took me to India, to the Oneness University. I had no idea why I was going there. I was just guided to go. And at the time, I had just come out of corporate, and um, I remember telling Ori I was going, because it was not even. He's like, "You don't want to have a conversation about this?" I'm like, "No, I'm going." Like, I had to like stand in my power, because who goes to India? Normal suburban moms don't do that, right? And but I went, and it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary. The Oneness University, and we looked at our inner child and what needed to be healed. And so it set me on a path of living an examined life, where I would look at my inner child so I could heal that, so that all the parts of me understand, all the different parts of my psyche understand that I'm a grown up now, and I am healthy, and I can make decisions. And you know they may not always be the best decisions, but they're my decisions, right? And I'll deal, because I always say that when things happen that are not to our liking, it's typically there's something to learn from it. It's not that something bad is happening to us, or or we're being punished. It's that we have to understand why we manifested that and what we're doing about it.
For
And
our
even for me,
audience, oh, go
and
ahead.
I can say, like, someone could say, well, what about COVID-19? I'm like, I'm kind of lost on that one too, everybody. Like, I don't really understand. Oh, when I look at COVID-19, I think about it as the world going inside. Like, we had to reset the earth, because I think we reached a dangerous place with pollution, on the planet, and we needed to go inside, all of us, and symbolically going inside and seeing, like, as you were, like a global meditation, almost, truly, everybody inside. And what are what's important for your life? I think it was a place of reevaluating what was going on, and for the world. And I guess, for all the people, I was really meditating today, for the 350,000 people that have lost their lives in the US. And I was like, who knew that, right? Right? Who knew that this time last year, we had no idea that this was going to happen. And people had no idea that they would be leaving the planet so fast, these 350,000 people. But they have served us so well to really perhaps change the world, to make the world more conscious and more connected. And so their loss, hopefully, was not in vain, and that it will be helping the way we just do everything. And I listened to a wonderful presentation by Lee Harris Energy. That's the name of his company. And he said 2020 was like 3 steps backwards so that we can move 7 steps forward in 2021.
Very
And
profound.
yes, and I'm hoping that that's what we see. We see this shift because also during COVID, we shifted in November to being grounded in the age of Aquarius,
What does that
which is
mean for our listeners?
it's the highest realm of consciousness that we could know on this planet. Meaning it's can be our most where we can live aligned with our most godlike or goddess-like self. Prior to that, we were in what was called the Iron Age or the Age of Man. And that was when we were in like striving to be as technologically proficient as we can, no matter what was the price to humanity or Mother Earth or her inhabitants or the oceans. Like it was all about man. It was all about getting ahead. It was all about greed. But now we've entered the age of Aquarius, which some call the age of God, which is the age of enlightenment, meaning that we become filled with light so that we look at the world as if we were God or a goddess, whatever you're into. So every time you look out into the world, you're saying, what would God do? What would Jesus do? What would whomever do? Muhammad do? Like what would Moses do? Right? Like looking at the world as if you were embodying, which you are now with the age of enlightenment, this light of divine consciousness. And so how would you see the world? What would you do next? How would you respond? And so that's what the age of Aquarius gives us the opportunity to embody that. And that's what brings me to my 4th book, which is coming out as an ebook, which is called King Solomon Speaks. And it's a series of meditations to take you from this idea of spirituality as a concept to embodying it and then being able to see the world as I just described it.
I'm so looking forward to that.
Yeah. So I've been studying this for quite a while and watching where we're going. And yes, so I'm just grateful to everyone, the frontline workers and the people who have lost their presence here on the earth to maybe help us to shift the way we all are on the earth.
Part of it maybe could be for those who believe we choose when we enter the planet, that they chose to come and do that for us.
Yes.
I don't know, but
yes, I mean, I've studied that a lot too in my studies, that people know this before they come. They know when they're arriving. They choose their parents before they even arrive to have a certain experience, because our parents are our most important relationship. And then if they get on the spiritual path, the first thing, and this is the most major teaching of the Oneness University, is that you have to heal your relationship with your parents in order to get anywhere on the spiritual path. And that's
so
really
much
hard.
resistance to that.
Well, and there's just it because we have to remember if we chose them. So we chose them when we said, this is what my soul wants to learn this lifetime. This is, before I come into this little tiny little body, I have a plan. My soul has a plan, and it wants to learn all these different things and come to a new place. And so I'm going to pick a couple of parents that will set that in motion. Like they're going to give me whatever I need, whether it's love or I don't know, whatever, maybe not positive energy.
Spectrum of
Trauma. Yeah. To make me either decide to heal my life or to stay in suffering. And so if we're reminded that we are this soul first that's here, embodied in this human body, then we say, what does my soul want me to know? And in the Lee Harris, I loved, he said, every day we should write down, what does my soul want me to know today? That's the question you should ask, write it down, and then read it out loud. And I love that because I'm a writing coach, writing recovery coach. So I love writing everything down, because I think when we write things down, we really, it leaves us for just a moment, hopefully, or longer, and it's on the page. And it's like the same concept when you have a zillion things on your mind and you can't sleep because you have like 10, 30 things that you have to get done. And then as soon as you write that to-do list, somehow you feel better, even though those same 30 things are on that piece of paper, just getting it out of your head and there. And that's what I think happens with writing recovery, is that when you write your story down, it starts to strengthen your recovery.
So, if I understand correctly, you brought this to a formal program. Is that true?
Yes, it is. It is.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, I have, yeah, so writing from the heart, or writing the writing recovery program is my coaching model. And then I also do group programs and fun. I have a fun one starting this Thursday, which is called Write with Spirit, because a lot of my writers were interested in connecting to the non-physical realm to enhance their writing, to really be able to go inside to their own inner divinity and connect with the sources for their own life, whether it's a spirit guide, an ancestor, an ascended master, whatever, animal, spirit, animal. And so I'm teaching a course on how to connect to that level with your writing. So you don't need to be looking to write a book, but you may want to enhance even your journaling. Right? If you journal every day, you may want to have a different level of journaling, because that's how I started writing. I started by writing letters to God and in my journal.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was actually woken up every night on the angel numbers 111, 222, 333 to write. And so I was writing these letters to God, and finally I said, could I write during the day? I mean, that's not what I said, excuse me. I said, can you stop waking me up during the night? And then I heard, well, then write during the day. And so I started writing these letters during the day, and um, and then that began my writing career, because I would write to God, dear God, thank you for this that's going on in my life. So I would be expressing gratitude, but I'm like, can you help me with this? And then I would be like, and then I would start writing the answer, what I think the answer is. And then if I knew in my heart that it felt good, then I knew that I was guided to that answer. If I was still in a state of fear or anger or frustration, then I knew that that was not the divine answering me. They don't do that. They don't necessarily say, hey, go apply for a job at Google. Like, they're not that specific. But if you're upset about not having a position at this time, but there is a level of guidance that you will receive to calm yourself, and perhaps to be guided to call so and so because they actually work in a related job, and maybe they know somebody at Google. Right? So you'll be guided to follow the breadcrumbs to Google if that's where you want to work.
So for someone who needs or wants to begin their inner child work, and perhaps they're not ready yet to work with someone on it.
Yes.
Would this course that you're doing be a good first step?
I don't think so. Not the course that I'm doing, because I'm really not an expert in inner child work. I I really believe you need to work with a therapist or a life coach, um, or the teachers from the Oneness University, um, somebody like that. I do think you need somebody who's been trained in it. I haven't been trained in it. What I'm trained in, I'm laughing trained because my training came through my own journey for writing. And I'm also a designated recovery coach. What my new program coming up will be to help people to bring forward what needs to come out of them, and then take a look at that. Maybe that's a good way to excavate what it is that you need to work on. So maybe that is a beginning. Maybe you're right, Adrienne, that just excavating that stuff, that this course will help with that.
So who would be, a little birdie told me, do you still have 3 spots left?
3 spots left. I'm meeting with some people this week to see if they want to join the course. Yeah, 3 spots left. Listen, this is what I know for sure. The exact right people will show up, because it's not just about the individual coming to the class, it's about the collective energy of the class in total, because it becomes a little community. And so I'm always intrigued by who shows up and how many show up, because I want that experience for them. I want them to be able to share what is going on in their past and their present, and what they desire for the future, and feel safe. And so each person that's signed up, I'm like, oh yeah, awesome. Love this person. Yes, they're coming. Some, or I love their background. They'll be a wonderful contributor. So it's really open to anyone that desires a greater connection on their spiritual path and is willing to look at it through the lens of writing.
Perfect. So we can't finish this interview without discussing New Year's resolutions.
Yes,
Why don't you
absolutely.
take us on
Yes.
your journey here?
So here's what I think. I think New Year's resolutions are good starting points. Like, I think it's a good recognition that something is wrong and you want something to be better. But I don't think that New Year's resolutions have sustainability for the long term if you don't understand why you were doing what you were doing and what is the underlying suffering that is creating the need for you to have a habit that you feel is destructive in your life. And so that's it, that's what it always comes back to. Why are you suffering? And 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 the New Year's resolution should include that. How do I move through the suffering? Like, how do I get, because if you just heal the behavior, you're healing the symptom. But if you look at why you're suffering, you'll be healing the problem. And that, I think, is really what's required for resolutions to work in the long run, and also recovery to work in the long run. The more you uncover, the longer and more powerful your recovery can be, and the longer and more powerful your resolution stays grounded.
That makes sense to me. So what I'm thinking is, if anyone in their New Year's resolution is thinking, I'm not going to drink anymore this year, I'm not going to smoke anymore this year, I'm not going to be bulimic anymore, whatever the issue is, right? Then I believe the place to begin, correct me if I'm wrong, is with Robin, with your book, Recovery and Addiction. I'm sorry, I got it wrong.
That's
right?
Okay. That's all right. Feast and Famine.
Feast and Famine, regardless of what the the addiction
Yes.
is. Would that be
Yes,
correct?
because there's information, of course, in the book about obsessive eating and bulimia, because I had to address that. But it's but everyone will benefit from understanding more about suffering, um, and what is required. It's funny, at the end of the so I was writing with Sophia, and at the end of the book, Yeshua, or Jesus, came in and said to me, "There's something wrong. There's something missing from this book, Robin." And I'm like, "All right." Like, I thought I was done, but okay. And so then I was guided to listen to Carolyn Meiss's CDs on a CD called Anatomy of the Spirit.
I've
And
heard
I
of
listened,
anatomy of the illness, but not.
yes, yeah, Anatomy of the Spirit. And I've listened to it. I listened to it twice. And I kept asking this question throughout the book, and I wasn't really getting an answer. And the question I kept answering is, why in addiction we talk about recovery, but why don't we talk about remission? And like, why can't we ever be done with it? And so what I learned in Carolyn's work is this idea of congruence. This idea of, if you can, in the long run, live recovery in your personal life, in your self-care, mind, body, spirit, and emotion, live it in your relationships, live recovery in your work, and live recovery as an active community member. If you can live recovery in all four of those congruently at the same time for a long time, then you can declare that you are in remission from recovery. And so that seems so interesting to me. So I think there's even beyond. I think I'm mentioning this because there's beyond recovery, I believe. And I'm in conversations with someone about doing a podcast on that, about recovery and beyond, because I think I would always look at my friends that were in recovery for 20, 30 years, saying, what is it that, why am I so enamored by them? Like, what is it? And then I came to realize that they were living in congruence, meaning that every part of their life was all about their recovery, not like obnoxiously telling people all the time, "Oh, recovery." Blah. No, they became recovery. They embodied it, and they were congruent in all aspects of their life. And I'm excited about that idea, about where this is possible. And for me, I'm only 2 years in recovery, but I'm excited to be able to declare remission at some point.
And I want to congratulate you on that. And it's very
Thank you.
inspiring, and I hopefully it's inspiring to our audience as well.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
we are with Robin Clare, author of Feast and Famine. And Robin, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So my website is clarity.com, CLARE-ITY.com. And on Instagram, it's Clarity by Robin. On Facebook, it's Clarity with Robin. And I also wanted to share that I have a 30-minute free consultation for anyone to talk about anything. And I promise that when we're done, you'll receive some guidance for your life. I don't really need to say what that's about. I think if people are guided to do that, they will take the offering.
And they can access that on your website.
On my website, it's on the bottom of every page. You cannot miss it.
We will put all of that in the show notes. And since I have a Kindle, can you show us your book?
Yes, I can. Here is the book. So this cover was done by a friend, George Herrick, and the idea was to show a plate, and that's cracked in the middle, and one side is feast, the clean white side, and the other side is famine, how we feel. But we're all still the same. It's all, and then there's the golden glue that's holding it together, because we are always feast and famine. because the actual expression we all know is feast or famine. But Sophia said we're feast and famine, and because we're always both. And so the idea is to find that place of complementary connection within yourself.
I'm sure our viewers would not regret picking that up, and you can get it on your website, on Amazon.
Yeah, you can get it on my website, and you can also get it if you